Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our celebrities home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
Are you allowed to do the Borat-esque accent that you kind of dropped a little earlier? Like, is that allowed?
Is it allowed?
Yeah,
like from a legal standpoint?
From a legal standpoint, probably. I mean, I guess I say this as someone who, like every single straight man ever, dropped a "my wife" at his wedding. But yeah, I don't know. That just stuck out to me.
Well, I think we need a 2/3. We need a 2/3 majority for a censure. So, Adam,
I think it was definitely legal, but maybe not ethical.
Ugh.
You know,
that was me dropping a really boring, like fucking Zeitgeist banger right on your face. I don't understand what I'm talking about. We should probably get on with the show because this intro is probably one of the worst intros we've had. I would say,
yeah, that's definitely
in the history of
dropping a Zeitgeist banger on my face.
Yeah, that was a weird one. Did I throw you earlier by saying you're wearing a slutty jumper? Like, I mean, I don't know what happened to your brain.
Now we got to do 5 minutes on the jumper. Okay, all right. Go on, explain the slutty jumper thing then.
Oh no, he's wearing a jumper and it's slutty. It's a nice knit. It's got a bit of you can see a bit of chest through it. Like, yeah, it's very nice.
I don't. Yeah,
too much chest.
Way too much. Yeah, that's no one wants that.
If you listen, I was showing them my chest. Yeah, so we're meant to be a podcast about newsy type stuff and things, as George said. Our intros often, we try to do some funny riffing at the start. Today hasn't worked.
And it worked.
Our first story.
And we nailed it.
No, it really hasn't. I just moved house. I'm tired. And George has a baby.
Tired as well.
So
we're all tired.
No. Adam's got no excuses. George has a baby. I just moved house. Adam, you've done jack shit.
I did 8 hours of laser tag yesterday in the bush, and then I drove to Lord, and I drove back again.
I spent 8 hours doing
fun stuff that I liked.
I'm so tired.
I had a situation the other day. I don't know if I told you guys on the show about this or not, but I went into I was in the office, which I'm sort of like still like 2 days a week in the office hybrid, and I ran into a colleague that I hadn't seen for some time, and she was like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" She's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Are you all right? You look terrible. Like, are you?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, no, we had the baby that we would."
Oh wow! So it's been that long. You mean colleague you haven't seen in quite some time?
Yeah,
like 10 months.
10 months or so.
Okay,
and I just hadn't spoken to her really. And but the way she spoke to me with like genuine concern, like, "Are you okay? Like, it looks like you look terrible. Like you're sick. Do you need to sit down? Like, you're all right." I was just like, "No, this is just how I look now." Like,
this is parenthood.
I thought I was doing well, but
now I feel crushed.
I guess not.
It's so gradual, you don't even notice someone who hasn't seen you for 10 months.
Yeah. Hurtful.
Wow. Reality check.
Anyway, speaking of hurtful, News and Politics podcast, where we talk about the news that causes psychic damage to its citizens here in Australia. There was so last week we talked about the NACC and the National Anti-Corruption Commission, and they announced that they would neglect to prosecute any of the referrals that had been made to them about the Robodebt scandal. So basically they said, the Public Service Commission is looking into it.
That's fucked up.
That's fucked up. I wish there was someone who could do something about that, but like someone's already looking into it, like chill, it's going to be fine. At which point 900 plus keyboard warriors said, absolutely, like, what the actual fuck? And wrote complaints out. And it's times like these that you got to love a keyboard warrior. Someone who's willing to, like, they're not willing to protest. They're not willing to donate any money. They're not willing to do anything of actual substance that might move the needle on political elections, like volunteer or door knocking or donating money or anything like that. But when it comes to writing angry letters, they will stop at nothing.
It's nothing better than writing an angry tweet.
Yes.
Like an angry tweet that's got a good solid burn
Yeah.
I saw an absolute cavalcade of then what's the point of you in response to this?
Yeah, which is what we said.
To which I was like, yeah, I agree. I didn't tweet it, so I'm even worse than those keyboard warriors. I'm a keyboard warrior with an audience of 1 myself.
Essentially, they got over 900 complaints of people saying, what the actual fuck, WTA fuck, and they, so an independent inquiry has now been launched into the NACC's decision not to probe Robodebt referrals. So, Tom, you had a sentence which summarized exactly the story here. So if you wouldn't mind just whipping that out.
Oh, yes. Well, we have hit peak Australia loves an inquiry because we are having an inquiry into why another body decided to not have an inquiry into something because someone else was having an inquiry into that something. Yeah. And the results of that inquiry were satisfactory to them, I guess. But yeah, we're
all kicking off from a royal commission, which
is basically just a big inquiry.
Kind of a big inquiry.
yes. A royal commission's the god tier inquiry.
It's just an inquiry with a strap on, essentially.
Jesus Christ. But so
cut this.
A royal commission is an inquiry with a strap on. George Sipos.
I'm so tired.
2024.
You need to cut me some slack.
Yeah. This inquiry is really going to have them pegged. So
this inquiry fucks.
Yeah. So I mean, there's not a whole lot else to sort of say about this other than that, but it's the fact that the Anti-Corruption Commission not looking into some corruption that they are supposedly anti has kicked up enough of a stink that we're now going to investigate. Rather than, if they'd just investigated the corruption in the first place, we wouldn't need to be investigating why they're not investigating the corruption that they should be investigating. Like, it's just this like, what's the opposite of like a Sisyphean kind of feat? Like the rock isn't being pushed up the hill; it's just tumbling down, and the hill is endless.
It's a Mobius strip of hill rolling. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is though, like, we worked out this last week, and we worked out last week that the NACC doesn't actually have any prosecutorial power. That's not a real word, but you know what I mean. Hasn't got any like powers to actually
any
penalize.
Yeah.
There's no. It can find a recommendation of corruption and then refer any
based on the statement that they issued. Like, I haven't looked at the legislation to see like
I looked at the website. The
have.
Website says nothing about prosecuting people. Their website's like, we can investigate people real hard, and so that is it.
Yeah. So really, this is kind of shown where we all thought this was going to be some form of way of stamping out corruption. Really, they're all just a bunch of. Wow, it's fucked, man.
But yeah, basically
they just stare blankly at you until you leave.
The statement from the NACC last week was basically like, we don't know why we're here either. That was more or less.
Fair, I think the concept is that like they would then, if there was anything illegal, they would refer that to the police or whoever, right?
The head of the NACC doesn't like bang a gavel and send someone to the gallows.
No,
like they don't.
Yeah, it's not RoboCop. That's not what I was expecting. But like, surely
Judge Dredd.
Yeah, exactly. You have been found guilty. The punishment is death. I just don't understand why. Then the Royal Commission, when they were doing their thing, conducting an inquiry, collecting evidence, and they put together a sealed section for the NACC for the purposes of criminal prosecutions, how the NACC can then turn around and say like,
"Nah, don't worry about it.
That's all right."
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's an inquiry into that. Who's going to conduct that? I don't know, but it's nice to think that we're not the only ones that are seeing this, because like I talked about it in last week in a way that was like kind of bemused. I was like, what's going on here then? Like, this is a bit silly, isn't it? A bit of silly buggers. And It's like, no, I should have been way mad about this because like gauging other people's reactions.
Your
Like,
outrage level was not sufficient.
Yeah.
Normally my outrage level is up there, but I don't think it was really quite sufficient because I turned around and everyone was like really mad about this. I was like, yeah, actually, when you say it in an angry voice, it is something I should be mad about. Like,
Yeah,
it was definitely causing psychic damage, as you've been throwing out as lately little sort of.
I've been playing a lot of Dungeons and
phrasing.
Dragons.
I was going to say,
so-
you're playing Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
Aren't you? I say that because I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3.
I am just absolutely balls deep in
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate 3 at the moment. So
Whilst Adam's still playing the same military sim he's been playing for 20 years. That's not fun. I'm just going to say it. Shut up,
it's not
man.
fun. It's not good. It's not a good time. If I hadn't already played too many hours, I would have requested a refund on it. It's not good. And
How would you play for too many hours? You only played it with me once in 2015 or something.
And that was 2 hours. That's it. That's all you get.
That's it. You're done.
True,
But no, I see why people are so furious because I guess I know you guys talked about this at length last week, but I feel
not
the
at
average.
length. You make it sound like we were just like blah blah blah.
No, I mean
It's like
you
talking,
really-
just like yada
you
yada,
really
just talking
got-
so much.
No, you really got into the nitty gritty. I
Okay.
enjoyed it while I
Good.
was moving boxes to my new flat. I
You're
was
our
listening to it
target
and I
audience.
appreciated it.
Our target
Yeah.
audience is us, the people
Yes.
in this virtual room.
Every artist that I know has always been about, make the film book painting that you want to see.
Right,
So,
but
yeah,
those are
basically-
famous people. There's like a survivorship bias
Yeah.
where they like got successful doing the thing that they always wanted to see, and so they turn around and go, "Just follow your dreams, everyone. It'll all work out." It's like, well, not all of us are Tom Cruise. Some of us are George Tsipos, and things don't work out for us. It's like a real survivorship bias with that kind of advice. Like, make the novel that you want to read. It's like, but the only person that wants to read that novel is specifically me, and I need other people to buy it.
But this would be an amazing moment for you to just peel your face off to reveal that you're Ethan Hunt.
I was Ethan Hunt the
You've
whole
been that
time.
This whole time. Anyway, no, my point is that I get why people are angry, and you guys got into this last week, in that I'd say I felt like I was sold on an anti-corruption commission that could fucking do something.
Yeah.
And so what we're learning out of this is, one, they're not going to do anything. But then, two, they couldn't really do anything even if they were trying to do something. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is really fucked up.
Tom, they can write a very detailed,
very
report,
angry letter,
and they can make a recommendation of corrupt behavior. Well, a recommendation. They can make a finding of corrupt behavior.
Well, hey, guess what? I made a couple of findings of corrupt conduct as well. So if my findings can have some legislative weight behind them, I think they may be as useful, if not more so, than the NACCs at this stage.
Yeah. So it's exactly that thing of we have seen, constantly over the past past forever, that those recommendations from those investigating bodies. They get adopted. They do stuff with that.
They love a good recommendation.
They take that feedback.
Yep.
They take it on board.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Huh?
They did nothing from the banks.
Oh, buddy.
Banks are all exactly the same and everything's fucked.
47
Smiling,
of the 54 recommendations got completely ignored. Okay, cool.
Smiling Frydenberg totally ignored everything that Justice Hayne was passing across to him.
That picture of Josh Frydenberg and Justice Hayne, has just no fucks to give. That's got to be one of my favorite moments in Australian political history. Like if I ever write a book, there's going to be that scene in there. But of course, I would be the only person that would read that book. So it's obviously not a New York Times bestseller.
Pull the mask off now. Go.
It was me, Ethan Hunt, the whole time. I was Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Dun. Anyway, can't wait for the next one of those when Tom Cruise destroys AI.
Tom Cruise, he will kill himself for our sins, and I'm here for it. Okay.
Apparently he's going to space. He's going to go to space and film on the International Space Station.
Yeah,
why not?
But I know, don't want to drop too many spoilers for the last Mission Impossible movie, but, the fucking, the mothership MacGuffin, if I'm using that expression properly.
I think so.
Thing in it is like a submarine that is stuck at the bottom of the fucking Mariana Trench. So I'm imagining for the next one, he's gonna go down to the bottom of the fucking ocean.
He has to. He's legally obligated to.
Or a stunt.
The man drove a motorcycle off a cliff.
Yeah.
And he did not have to do that. They have CGI.
It fucking ruled.
Like
that
he did a halo
though.
jump and like out of a plane. Like you don't have to do these things, Tom. Has someone spoken to him? Like you're a millionaire. You don't have to do any of this.
But how fun is that though?
I will happily pay $17.95 to go and watch it. It's one of the only things I'm happy to pay for.
George, that's amazing. And if you can tell me what cinema you're going to pay $17.95 for a ticket.
There was a cinema.
Tell me and
around,
only me.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone else know because then I'll never be able to book a ticket.
There was a cinema around here that had movie tickets for, I want to say $12. And I was thrilled about it. Adult tickets for $12 when we first moved here. And then, we had my son. Yep. And haven't been able to get out to see a movie.
Kicked in.
And I was like, we gotta get out and go to that cinema and go see some movies. I looked it up, place is closed down, doesn't exist anymore, it's gone. Couldn't survive the cost of
sustainable business
I was
model.
just like, that checks out with the $12 movie tickets. That checks out. Anyway, this is a news and politics podcast.
Cost of living.
Yeah.
Jets are pretty expensive as well. Plane trips, cost of living.
They sure are. Have you
priced
a jet lately?
I mean,
what do you mean price?
Is that?
Everyone used to be able to buy a jet. You know what I mean? Like, to have your general advice. By the time you're 30, you should have your own private jet, your own house, and
own your own house, own a car, own a G6. That's what you should do by the time you're 30. If you listen to TikTok, so
that's just how it used to be. That's what it was like for my parents and your parents, and and earlier than that, I mean, there was the Depression, so it was more probably like just little
biplanes
or whatever, or like the Wright brothers plane. And before they invented planes, I mean, you got your own Dragon, I suppose.
You got I was going to say like a pair of Icarus wings and just kind of flapped around.
Flapped around.
And there was so much more affordable.
Barnaby Joyce is still flapping. It's still flapping, guys.
Still flapping, so but you always got your own pair of wings. Sort of, back when they invented the plane. That's why they called them flappers back in the 20s.
That's true. That's a true fact. Look that up.
But the cost of living crisis. No one gets their own plane except
no
Peter Dutton.
They say, the boomers will say, we had our own planes, but it was harder because it was like 17% interest rate. So like you couldn't buy your own plane. We had to like save up real hard. You're like, it's basically exactly the same, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly the same. Sorry, Adam, you say Dutton rented this plane rather than
rented the plane,
his own plane. So actually that makes him more relatable, I think,
to renters.
To renters than anything else will make him. But he
chartered the plane, I think, is the exact term. Chartered.
Right.
I think I chartered. No, sorry, go on.
Okay, all right, cool. Peter Dutton is in the news this week when he used a taxpayer-funded private jet to travel to a News Corp event in Tamworth, which was worth, or he claimed at least, $23,000 in travel expenses. And it was at a summit. And then when he got to the summit, he then decided, it was probably slated and booked in well in advance, but he then spoke about, the government's response, or his criticisms of the government's response to the cost of living crisis. So there were, so let's get some context. So it's perfectly fine for MPs to claim travel expenses as part of their job. Okay, they can do that. That's a thing within their remit.
If they're traveling as part of their job, as part of their work, and related to their responsibilities as an MP or a minister.
An MP, yes. Yeah. In this case here...
Where is Peter Dutton's seat? Is that in Tamworth or...
No,
in New South Wales.
Brisbane, somewhere in,
which is a different place to Tamworth,
Queensland.
Yes,
different place. But there are multiple flights from Canberra to Tamworth each day. These are commercial flights that he could have booked, but there was a pre-existing commitment, which means that he also had to be back in Queensland for something, so just couldn't make it work with the scheduling. So he just had to charter this private plane for $23,000, and
how much?
Fly $23,000.
$23,000. Wow, and he paid that out of pocket. That's a lot of money.
No, he's claimed. Well, he paid it and then he's claimed it back.
Right. So the taxpayers.
He paid it out of a pocket.
It was someone's pocket. That's true. He just couldn't.
It was the public.
Couldn't resist the allure of the big golden guitar and just had to get to Tamworth. That's a real Tamworth.
Is there a big golden guitar?
Big golden guitar. Yeah, look it up.
Love the big.
So the event was it was I think actually Gina Reinhardt had something to do with it as well.
Oh,
so you've got a few,
and there it is. And there it is. It's not like he went there
Yeah.
because, you know, there's a controversial like Albanese government thing going on and he wanted to be there to like, you know, rally the protesters to his base or whatever. It was a News Corp event. And it's
so it's
like,
a News Corp event sponsored by Gina Reinhardt's
Yeah.
Hancock Prospecting in Tamworth. So I guess this is covered under like, you know, a political engagement. Funny enough, though, like Anthony Albanese also, I think, attended the event as well, where there were protests out the front. But it's funny, like, I guess my point being is...
That sounds like the most Bohemian Grove fucking lizard people, like conglomeration of like secret evil people that I've ever heard of in my life. There's the Daily Telegraph's annual Bush Summit, paid for by Gina Reinhardt, attended by Peter Dutton. And I think they were just cracking skulls and drinking adrenochrome. Like, what else could you possibly be doing?
Like, it does make you wonder around, like, if you talk about their, for both parties, like, if your expense is to serve your community, how are you serving your community by going to a News Corp event in Tamworth?
Because they're, Adam, their real constituents are News Corp. That's is Rupert Murdoch and Gina Reinhardt and the mining billionaires are the real constituency, and they always have been. That's the answer.
Look, he's obviously recognised that, you know, like one flight, that's fine. 2 flights would be taking the piss, so he did fly commercial.
That'd be ridiculous.
He returned commercial home. Great.
So, just to be clear, he went up there to go and then made a speech about the cost of living.
Yes.
And I think there's nothing more representative of the struggle of the Aussie battler more than a humble Queensland cop chartering a $23,000 private plane to fly to a Daily Telegraph event and whinge about cost of living. I think that's what the everyman wants. That's really the kind of like populist, you know, Joe Blow, Joe Six-Pack message that the Liberal Party needs right now. They really need to connect with those voters. And the only way to do that, due to prior commitments, is to charter, at taxpayers' expense, a jet for $23,000. That's relatable. You know, people get
relatable.
That. They get that. It's so relatable.
And at the conference, or at the what they call it, the summit. It was called a summit. Dutton said that the cost of living was his main priorities, and asked about what he saw his role as opposition leader. Dutton listed holding the government to account on issues like cost of living. He also criticised the government's energy policies as incredibly expensive and claimed regional and rural Australians were being treated as second-class citizens.
Not like me, Peter Dutton, who took a private jet to come here. That's not too expensive for me or the taxpayer. It's the climate change policies that are going to...
I'd just like to know, like,
what are the emissions associated with a private jet flying from Canberra?
I'm sure he would have had his staff. He would have had his like an assistant there, and maybe a security officer and someone else.
But again, not the Prime Minister. He's just the leader of the opposition. He's just an MP.
Polisher,
like, he's not the government. He's not in the government. He does not have responsibilities. Like,
it is very much. It feels more like a campaign expense.
Yeah, doesn't it?
Yeah,
which would be not legal if that were the case.
Yeah, like it kind of feels like, the opposition leader going around just giving speeches of how the current government's shit just sounds like campaigning. You're campaigning, right?
Yeah, it does. It does feel a bit like, I mean, and this has come up, numerous times, and we'll talk about, I guess, this in a bit about in relation to the South Australian government, but the concept that they can claim, the kind of things they can claim, political expenses for is ridiculous. The kind of things, and then also donations is a whole other thing. But like, for instance, let's think about, was it Peter Christensen? Not Peter Christensen. What was his name? George Christensen.
What? Tell me the story, and I'll tell you who you're talking about.
The guy went to Manila back and forth.
That was George Christensen.
George Christensen. Yeah.
So like, he was claiming, I mean, I could be wrong here, but my understanding was that there were some of those were claimed as
work trips
expenses as well. Work trips as well. I could be wrong. I mean, I don't want to say that's an absolute fact, but it was well known for doing that, going back and forth.
That's where the whole Minister for Manila thing came from, right?
I think he had family members there or something.
Yeah. But like claiming it as work expenses, being like, oh, so your constituents in Manila.
Yeah.
What?
But it's very loose. Like, I mean, Anthony Albanese has claimed something like, I mean, the Guardian's got the numbers here.
But he's the
911,000.
The difference is he's the prime minister. Okay, so when he goes to places, when he goes to the G20, when he goes to the G7, when he goes to ASEAN, when he goes to all of these international bilateral, multilateral conferences, he's there for work because he's the boss of the country. Whereas Peter Dutton is just some cunt with an expense account. Do you understand the difference?
Dutton spends less. So Anthony Albanese spent 646,970 in employee travel, and then Dutton spent $381,374.
I know. No, shut up. I know you know my son is in the next room, and I need to be quiet, and that's why you're doing this to me. But it's not funny anymore, and I need you to stop. Okay?
No, it's fantastic. I love seeing just the look on Adam's face where he's like, I know just saying this is going to shit George.
He knows. He knows he's shit staring. And if you look at this little shit eating grid right now, you'll know that he knows he's shit staring.
It's great.
I do. I just want to make sure that Dutton's getting represented here, okay, and that
poor
the
Peter
numbers,
Dutton.
the numbers are fairly put out there. Yes. Our next story. We'll move on to give George some reprieve.
So I just need to have a sip of this chamomile tea. Maybe I'll put the whiskey in the chamomile tea, and the combined effect of those things will calm me down. You know,
thank God that's chamomile tea. Because when you mentioned before, like, oh, I got a bottle of whiskey here, maybe I'll have a dram, and I see you lift up this mug full of an amber liquid to sip. I was like, Jesus Christ!
I said two fingers of whiskey, and I just keep the fingers keep getting wider and wider. As
holy cow! Thank God.
No, so this
real sausages.
This one's chamomile tea. This one's whiskey. As you can see, they both look pretty similar in coloration. So,
you sure you got them the right way around?
No! Oh no! I'm driving. Oh fuck, man! Oh, fuck.
Driving to the lounge room. Off my bed.
Give me your keys, man. You're drunk.
Speaking of drunk, Chemist Warehouse is trying to merge with Sigma Healthcare, which is a story which broke in December of last year.
Are you just free associating words now? Like, that's got nothing to do with drunkenness.
No, I'm just trying to get us back on track.
You're only just picking up on that now after.
No, I noticed. I let it go, but yeah,
podcast. Adam just picks the last thing you said and then says the next story. Like,
right, so
just makes it like no
make it work.
It was.
Say what you want about Adam, but yeah, the man's a professional.
Speaking of professional, Chemist Warehouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can make anything make sense somehow because they're a professional organization.
Speaking of making sense, ACCC warns Chemist Warehouse, but I see how it's done. Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah. So they were merging. They're merging deal. Let's get the fucking story.
All right.
So yeah, last year they announced Sigma Healthcare, Chemist Warehouse. They're merging together. They are two pharmacy pharmaceuticals. They're pharmacy brands, okay? Chemist Warehouse, a bunch of retailers. Sigma have got retailers as well as distribution centers as well.
Well, and a wholesale element. So that's the key part of this. So essentially what they're wanting to do is Sigma is going to, well, they say it's a merger. It's more of an acquisition, right? What they're wanting to do is acquire Chemist Warehouse and bring them into the fold as part of the Sigma brand. Now, whether the branding would stay the same will be different. And they haven't really discussed that aspect of it yet. But what it would do is bring Sigma Healthcare, which has retail locations as well. It would expand their footprint from 400 pharmacies around Australia under the so they have the Amcal branded pharmacies, discount drugstores, Guardian pharmacies, Pharmasave. These are all very recognizable pharmacy brands. Like most of the pharmacies that you would see around are either like Chemist Warehouse or these. You've got some like Green Cross and a couple other brands in there as well, but this would be like a significant chunk of the market. So it would bring their 400 locations up to 1,000 retail locations and 16 distribution centers as opposed to, I think it was 4. So, but they describe it as a merger, but it really is an acquisition because Sigma is a publicly traded company, right? And what they're wanting to do is purchase Chemist Warehouse, which is a privately owned company, for $700 million cash and stocks. But the stock that would be required to pull that off would be most of Sigma's stock. So everyone who's currently a Sigma shareholder would own about like 14% of the company. And the rest like would be something like 85% would be Chemist Warehouse owned. So essentially why they're doing this is because it would basically create a situation where they're more or less like a monopoly in the pharmacy space. Like the only reason that you would want to do this would be to completely consolidate your position in the market. The reason that this is even more dangerous than two retail operators that are very large joining together is because Sigma has the wholesale operation as well. So the people that supply the products to the pharmacies are also Sigma, which is fine when they're owned and operated by Sigma, right? Because it's just like when people talk about vertical integration, this is what vertical integration is, right? So you've got the supplier, you got the pharmacy at the bottom level. They're the ones selling the product to customers. You've got the wholesaler above them, the people who sell the things to the pharmacy for them to sell to their customers. And then you've got distribution. You've got the people who make and manufacture and sell the products all the way up the chain. By creating this merger, what Sigma would do is effectively control multiple levels of that vertically integrated chain. So this is how, Nelson Rockefeller, the Rockefellers got rich, is because the Rockefellers owned everything from the pump to the pump out of the ground of the oil, all the way through the distribution chain to the pump of you putting it in your car. When you own the whole vertical chain, it can make you immensely wealthy because you can control your input and output costs at every step of the process in a way that's most advantageous to you. So for example, if Sigma, the wholesaler, says, I want to give preferential treatment to all of the Sigma retail stores and thus all of the Chemist Warehouse stores, if this deal were to go through, well, they're giving advantageous terms to like half the market, which is all in their pocket. And it means they could give disadvantageous terms to anyone who's not in the group. And that creates bad incentives, which effectively creates a kind of a monopoly. It's too much market power concentrated in one organization, which means it inevitably has worse outcomes for the consumer, because if you've got a captive audience, you can charge them what you want. So, and they know this to a certain extent. Like the executive who was talking about the program said in a statement, Sigma says the ACCC's announcement of this, sort of warning about the merger was, quote, not unexpected, unquote, given the size and complexity of the proposed merger. Quote, we are cooperating closely with the ACCC and look forward to continuing to do so in the next phase of the merger review, said Sigma CEO Vikesh Ramsunder. So it's like, he's basically said like, yeah, we knew the ACCC was going to come after us. Like, this is definitely monopolistic as fuck what we're doing. We kind of expected that. And it's like, I love the addition of, we're cooperating closely with the ACCC and look forward to continue. It's like as though you had a choice. Like,
I was going to say, they look forward to it.
Yeah, love it. Can't wait.
They said with a gun to their head.
Yeah. Oh, it's
smile.
So great.
Everybody's happy.
Yeah. Working with the professional buzzkills is so much fun.
Yeah,
we really look forward to it.
Yeah, it's
welcome the inquiry. We are looking forward to the inquiry.
We have the full support of the government. What they didn't say is, he said it in a sarcastic voice, we're cooperating closely with the ACCC. I look forward to continue. Yeah, he just said it all sarcastic, but they have to print it. So
the ACCC hasn't delivered any findings yet. Their opening sort of concern is that the configuration could raise barriers to rivals expanding or entering, which may lessen competition because, as George said, there'd be a monopoly on the market, basically. It would be, the ACCC basically effectively said that it would be a new business model for the pharmacy sector.
A new business model because they control multiple steps of the value chain, right? Like that Rockefeller example I was talking about, where it's like they own so much of the supply chain now that it's like, it's not really a pharmacy where it's like, oh, they bought Panadol from Panadol and they sell you the Panadol. It's like, we are the Panadol. We control the horizontal. We control the vertical. If you want headache relief, you have to come through us.
And to be clear, the reason why everyone loves the concept of competition is because it keeps prices in check. If you don't have competition, it could, in theory, lead to increased prices because they can charge whatever the fuck they want.
Thank you for pointing that they keep prices in check, not necessarily low.
Well, when there's more competition, I guess there's an incentive for people to compete on price in a way that there may not be that incentive when there's, say, for example, two major supermarkets. Maybe there isn't that incentive for them to compete on price as much because if you don't shop here, you have to shop there. So it's effectively a monopoly, even though there's two players because, well, it's a duopoly is what they call it because it's the same thing, right? And we're not price fixing. We're just setting our price roundabout exactly where the other guy is setting his price. Just looking, we're not colluding. We're not cooperating. We just both happen to set our prices at roughly the same ever increasing levels.
Forever.
And, you got to shop somewhere. So if you don't like it, suck eggs.
I think they're taking the ACCC is taking submissions. So if you would like to be one of just like in our first story, you could be one of the people to make a submission. If you want to make a submission, you can contact the ACCC. I'm sure there are details on their website.
So just FYI, so Chemist Warehouse currently controls 400 pharmacies roughly across Australia, which according to this article says makes up about 50% of Australia's market share. Right. So the idea that they would merge with another organization and their, several hundred pharmacies would equate to a pretty large chunk of the Australian.
Oh, it's 1,000 retail stores and 16 distribution centers should the merger be approved.
Yeah.
Which is
what I'm saying is that makes up like a pretty substantial amount of the
it's like 80. It's like 80%. Yeah. I made that number up, but it's
substantial.
Around about there. Ballpark.
All right. Your made-up number is good enough for me.
Speaking of made-up numbers, the South Australian government has announced a new, it's not really a new plan, it was an election promise actually, but a plan to introduce laws to ban political parties from receiving electoral donations at a state level. So
that sound you just heard was lobbying groups all shitting their pants at the same time. They hit the brown note.
The Premier, Peter Malinauskas, has described it as world-leading. So what this would do would be, normally, you can just, if you're a citizen of the world, you can just go in and donate to any political party here in Australia. No worries. No one's
what if I'm not a citizen of the world?
Well, then you're an alien, and then there's probably a bunch of UFO people that would like to speak to you with long beards and hoods.
But I would like to donate to a political party.
Sure, come on in. Let's get it. That's what we'll take.
Sorry, just a little correction there. So I was looking up how many. This is the kind of fun Google search that I'm renowned for. Just sort of the split of the market share of various pharmacy groups in Australia.
Was 80% correct?
It was not. So the Sigma Healthcare currently has about 13.3% of the market. Chemist Warehouse has 12.9%. And then you've got other players like EBOS and API, sort of 10%, 8% respectively. So,
is that like 30% then?
So, but it would make it the largest player in the market by far, with over, sort of 26, 27% of the whole market, which is pretty substantial, given that the largest chunk is independent at 45%. So it would make it the single largest pharmacy group in Australia by far.
Yeah,
eclipsing the next largest single player by 2.5 times. So blowing other players out of the water. I just wanted to. That's an article from The Conversation. We'll post that in there.
That's good. My 80% number was.
When you said it, I was like, that sounds like a big number, but I was like, almost certainly wrong.
Well, thank you very much. There we go. Cool, yeah, you can now have that information in your brains. Basic.
We did it.
We did it together.
Malinauskas. Talking about Malinauskas. Peter Malinauskas.
This was I believe an election promise. So basically, just means if you're a political party or someone who's standing for office, you are no longer able to accept donations. There are laws that would allow for people who are newcomers. So if it's your first time, you get to have some donations, but it's only $2,700, which
per
I think
person.
Probably per person, which probably pays for what the rego, I guess. Maybe
I actually think
don't
that's a
know.
great idea because I mean, clearly the large established political parties don't need that money, and they can have publicly funded, elections. But how do you solve the problem of newcomers trying to break into the space and them having the money to be able to achieve what
Like
they
true
want to do in the space? Yeah, independents like the Teals and things like that. How do you allow them to get a start without ensuring public funding? Public funding is great, but it doesn't allow for newcomers because anyone could just say they're a newcomer, and then how do you prevent them from getting the same amount of political funding as established parties?
Just next election, we just have Albo with a mustache.
It's just me, guy incognito.
Yes.
There's a whole suite of laws that go part of this as well. So there's like, in addition to this, they're also going to try and cap spending of political parties during campaigns. So rather than it being, there is actually already a cap. So it's 111,513 for a candidate contesting a lower house seat. They would cap that to 100,000, which feels like a
total across the campaign
per seat.
Per seat, per candidate contesting a lower house seat can only spend 111,513.
He's talking about state elections, I assume.
But that also feels that feels low. Just all the
sorry, we got Tom Tom the Guillotine Heath coming in on the side of big money.
What? No,
an unexpected heel turn, Tom. I'll be honest.
No. Sorry, what I meant was more like wait. Like, but they only spend that now
for a state government seat. We're not talking about federal elections.
Government.
We're talking about state government elections.
Yeah, that feels
which are pretty
lower
small.
than I would have expected.
Well, how much do you reckon it costs to run a bloody Facebook ad?
It's Adelaide. It's Adelaide in South Australia, Tom. There's like 5 people there.
Yeah, but like all the
five people and 12 churches between them.
There's a couple of million people in South Australia, but they are mostly based around Adelaide, as far as I'm aware. I'm not sure what the regional population of South Australia is, but anyway, so they cap that down to 100,000, and I guess you spend that on Facebook ads or whatever they do.
Whatever you need to trigger the libs, that's what you spend it on.
But this is an interesting one. Is that so? In lieu of the revenue they would lose from donations, it's proposing that taxpayers pay registered political parties for administrative expenditure, which would see major parties able to access more than $1 million each year. So
it's public funding. That's what we've always talked about.
Correct. But I guess the question then becomes is like, well, how do you divvy out who gets what money? Is it per seat? Because does that then just entrench the spending power of people?
What I understood, it was $1 million per like major party for administrative.
Yeah, but what's a major
expenses.
Party?
Well, you'd have
like
to
just
look
one of the two or three.
That's the assumption. Yeah, I don't know. I need to look at the legislation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think from the small detail in this article, it's a bit vague as to how that would work, and there has been criticism of these laws from various sectors of the political community, obviously, because it's probably, it's, as you said, Tom, all the lobbyists are going, what do we do for work?
What? I wasn't even thinking about it. What do we do for work? It was more just but we suddenly lose all the power?
Won't someone think of the lobbyists?
Yeah.
One more part of this legislation as well, which I just mentioned on.
Bloody Adam coming in with facts. Shut up. Let me get to my opinions.
Facts. So currently candidates wanting to contest a lower house seat require at least 20 people to sign a nomination form as an endorsement. So that number would climb to 100. And then if you want to get into the upper house, it would be double the current requirement of 250, which would be 500 signatures. So if you want to run for the Senate, the South Australian Senate, you get 500 signatures.
So I think that's actually kind of clever because what you're doing, it is essentially, yes, it is a piece of legislation, the direct beneficiaries of whom you would think would be the two major parties, right? But it's sort of taxed towards centrism, right? Because by making the requirements higher, you potentially are providing a bit of a bit of gatekeeping for any kind of fringe candidates, any kind of real crazies, any kind of, Pauline Hanson or Fraser Annings or, One Nation guys mowing SWAT stickers into their lawns. Like you make the threshold for them getting involved in politics a little bit harder. So presumably you get fewer of those. And the people who are the major beneficiaries of this, the people who are getting the majority of the resources would be the two major parties. So there is like a kind of like a bit of political nous going on there as to like, okay, well, they are going to be the major beneficiaries. However, I think it's unambiguously a good thing to get corporate money out of politics. Like to the extent that we can publicly fund elections, like obviously the devil's in the detail with all of that as to how you do it in a way that is fair and that takes into account political newcomers and the creation of new parties and doesn't consolidate power strictly within the two major parties. You need to have mechanisms that allow that and that are cognizant of that. And that's why I think the political donations for newcomers below a certain size, that could be a good way to ameliorate that, right?
Yeah.
But like, I think broadly speaking, the principle of not having corporate money in politics is a good thing. Like getting influence, getting lobbyists, getting fossil fuel money, getting that out of politics means that you will have political parties that are primarily accountable to the public good and to their voters and representing their interests, because they don't need to go jerk off a bunch of lobbyists to get money in order to save their seat. Like they get the same amount of money regardless. So,
But I mean, there's also a legal aspect to this, which we'll talk about in a second. But like, my thing is like, does this just end up in like where we are in the US, where it's like you basically create super PACs, whereby
well, this doesn't necessitate that. You would need to legislate super PACs if you want super PACs.
No, but like lobby groups could make their own funding system outside of the party's direct control, but it's like
we already have things like Get Up and things like that, which is sort of like
and all that
politically oriented like action committees that aren't.
But does that just move the money though from here to here? Is my point.
Yeah, potentially.
The advertising revenue, the advertising output increases as opposed to just.
If we had to outline a system where there was no corporate money directly involved in parties and politics, but there was an active, robust, outer circle of private money, spending money on political communication, or the situation that we have currently where we have the outer circle spending corporate money on political communication and lobbyists speaking directly to government and directly funding parties via donations explicitly. Like, would I rather have option 1 or option 2? Well, I'd rather have option 1. Like, it is better than there is a certain element of like, you can't restrict legal speech and people having political opinions or opinions about like the voice to parliament, like Advance Australia did, and advancing a view like Get Up does. Like, you can't stop them from doing that in a free and open society. But to the extent that we can get that money directly out of politicians' pockets, I think that's to the public good, right?
What do you think, Tom?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I agree, because like any kind of like financial influence from groups, like from all directions, kind of warps a politician's ability to sort of do their job.
Yeah.
Like, their whole job of listening, I guess, yes, they have to be listening to experts and things like that, but the experts shouldn't then also be paying them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know I'm drawing a rather long bow of calling like the lobbyists experts in the fields that they lobby for, but
that is a real thing. Yes, like, you want to speak to people who've got industry expertise and know what they're talking about and have a view to represent. Like, you as a politician should want to hear them, but I agree, those people should not also be paying you, because whether you realize it or not, that is influencing you in your decision making.
And
like, it absolutely, it always does. That's why they do it.
And where there's like on the one hand, the cynical avenue of just, oh, well, it's money directly to the MP, so they get to have their fun, wealthy lifestyle because of this particular like fossil fuel or whatever. But I feel it's just more that it's for me to be able to retain my $200,000 a year job, I need money from the fossil fuel lobby to be able to run the election that will get me re-elected.
The other thing,
what stops them from actually having any fucking teeth against these people when it's like the planet's dying, right? So I think it's an excellent thing to take out kind of corporatized money into politics.
The other thing, a lot of times, the thing that is really insidious about corporate money in politics, doesn't really work how you expect it to work. From the accounts that I've read and listened to about this, we think it's that, like what you see in like House of Cards, where it's like a greasy lobbyist comes up and says, I want to give you a bunch of money if you do crimes. And he like twirls his mustache like Snidely Whiplash. Yeah. And they go, I will take the money and do crimes for your money. It's like, that's not really how corruption works. What happens is, especially in the United States, where the rules around this are even more lax than they are here, oftentimes sitting Congress people have to spend the majority of their time chasing money because a congressional seat is worth several $100,000, millions of dollars in some cases. The vast bulk of their time as a congressperson is spent smiling and dialing, trying to raise money from various donors. They are the ones approaching lobbyists saying, hey, I know you've got this list. Can you throw this event for me? Can you throw this fundraiser? Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? They're begging the lobbyists to come and help them because they need to raise money in order to not lose their seat. And it's become an arms race of corporate money, our corporate donors versus their corporate donors, and who can raise the most. And so what that does is it inherently takes away from the primary function of why the person is in Congress or in Parliament in our case, which is to represent the voters. If you are physically spending the majority of your time chasing money, there's an opportunity cost. You are now not looking at legislation, making representation on behalf of your constituents, or making representation on behalf of their interests. You are hanging out with the guy from Woodside trying to raise money. You just physically you only have so many hours in the day. And so that takes away from the interests of the people. I think it's unambiguously a good thing to get money out of politics. Of course, as with the situation in South Australia, the devil's going to be in the detail as to how it works. But I think like first impressions, getting corporate money out of politics, all good by me. That sounds good.
All on board the idea. Let's see.
The High Court may not let them do it.
You know what?
The other aspect of this.
Fuck him. Which is basically the point that Peter Malinowskis made. It's like, get caught trying. Like, yeah, when the High Court might overrule it, but like they might not. So let's get caught trying. Like,
and the reason for that is that there is an implied right to
freedom of speech,
political communication,
which is freedom
specifically.
Of speech.
Yeah, but it's like, sure, you know, fucking Gina Reinhardt and all those companies, you can keep espousing your political views and like calling on the government to do certain things. You just can't also then hand them a giant duffel bag full of cash.
Yeah, like a canvas bag with a dollar sign on it to make sure that they do it.
Yeah.
It was funny. They
taking away your ability to express your political opinion as to like what the government should be doing. You just can't then also pay them to do it.
The thing is, government is hopelessly outmatched. The thing that really struck me watching Craig Rucastle's documentary, I think it was called Big Deal or The Big Deal, something like that. It was like a year or two ago. When he talked about this, is how surprisingly affordable corruption is in Australia. Like, it's just like, oh, like someone with a decent sized bank account could individually make this kind of corruptions that donations that like Woodside donated. Like, I was like, yeah, that's like tens of thousands of dollars, you know, to like Labor or the Liberal Party, and you know you'll see a donation from BHP or Santos, and it's like $12,000. It's like
and all of a sudden
$38,000, and you're like, hang on, is that all it costs to run the country? Is like a couple of $100,000 between huge multinational companies with billions of dollars in their pocket, where this would barely appear as like a line item next to strippers on their fucking annual report. Like, is that really all it costs to buy democracy? Is like $40,000? Like, is that all?
Yeah. Not much.
That and a decent dinner. In the case of Matt Guy.
And then you wake up and there's a dead stripper in the bed, and then they own you. They got you, bro. They got you forever.
Was that House of Cards?
That was The Godfather.
Was there a? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was The Godfather. Or The Sopranos. One of those.
Yeah, maybe one of those.
Insert Hollywood reference.
Yeah, I've seen both those things. Obviously, the famous thing from The Godfather is the horse head, but I don't think you're mixing up those two things.
My Google searches are going to do me in one day. Wake up with a dead stripper in the bed.
You are seriously not. Oh my God.
I think it's House of Cards.
It's got to be like a thing because you guys know what I'm talking about.
I know it's literally the premise of one of the stories in Sin City, but like
maybe it's a cliche.
I don't think it's that.
There's got to be a movie that has it in there.
That has that. Yeah.
The movie is Living in Peril.
Well, never heard of it.
No,
so
neither.
Wow.
Because you're right. I remember the Godfather scene with the horse head.
effect, like,
but we've all
into existence.
We've all seen that.
No, well, I'm not sure I have. That's why I was like, does that happen in The Godfather? I remember the horse bit.
Yeah.
I remember seeing The Godfather, like, I only saw it for the first time like a year or so ago. And I remember when there was the guy being like, yes, and this is my prize horse. So I was elbowing my wife, being like, not Schrodinger's horse, Chekhov's horse. Like, that's the horse. That head's going to end up somewhere crazy, you see.
Poor horsey.
Yeah, very poor horsey. And it was made in the 70s, so it's probably the actual horse.
I could have sworn it was Godfather or like The Godfather 2 or something like that, where they're like...
I haven't seen Godfather.
It literally doesn't matter. Anyway, next story. Speaking of next story...
Speaking of please let this end.
Yeah.
God,
I'm in hell. God, release me.
If you know what movie there is a stripper that's found dead in the bed, you know what movie that is, please let us know.
No, that's okay. You can keep that to yourself. I don't need those. I don't need to go on a list with ASIO from getting all these emails in my inbox about dead strippers.
You are already on a list from ASIO.
What a sad
litany
list
of reasons.
What a sad list I must be on at ASIO.
And just like sad weirdo list. And just go.
Weirdo cucks, and there's like 12 of us on there.
Good. So, next story. The Australian Defence Force has an issue, guys. They've got an issue, and
only one.
Just the one.
Just the one issue.
Just the one issue. Yep, fair enough.
Ignore the burning hard drives.
Ignore the ships that aren't being built.
Yeah.
If we're expecting to be invaded navally, don't you think like 1,000 drones might actually be a better investment than like 8 nuclear armed submarines?
Yeah, they've got a personnel problem. They've got a recruiting problem. They've got an image problem. They can't get enough people to join the Defence Force. So currently, they're 4,400 workers short. And I think the plan is eventually and this is what they flagged as part of the big review they did. They want to lift the number of permanent ADF members to 80,000 people by 2040. Currently, they have 57,000. This is full-time members as well. It doesn't include reserves. Last year, so they're a decent sort of 23,000 short at the moment, and they're short of their current numbers as well. So there's been a lot of talk in the media and stuff about this and how they're gonna fix it. What are they going to do? And then the government's announced a policy where they're going to let people who are permanent residents join the Defence Force. So and there's been some sort of a few like missing bits around the community. A few what would you call contradicting statements around this.
I would call them. I would contradict you and say contradictory statements.
Contradictory statements.
Contrarily.
I mean, I think they're both words that you can use in that sentence if we want to get really specific. But
I disagree.
I see what he's doing, and I'm not going to fall for it.
Yes, you are.
Damn it. Yeah, so basically, start off with the policy is going to be that if you are a permanent resident from New Zealand, you are going to be able to join the Australian military, and then that will also give you a path to citizenship, which you would be expected to take up.
Yeah, that's the part that I thought was interesting. Is like would actually be a requirement if you like were to continue with the ADF past a certain point. Is like you would have to become a citizen, which I guess kind of makes sense, but like. Presumably people would take it up for the purposes of becoming a citizen and having an expedited kind of citizenship situation, right? Like, isn't that kind of what they're wanting to incentivize? Is like, join the ADF and you'll become an Australian citizen. Like, we can kind of like, that's a nice little incentive as being part of this process. But also like, there's like a loyalty aspect of it as well. It's like, well, you need to be a citizen of the country that defend it. If I don't know, to avoid any like accusations of dual loyalties or things like that. Like,
well, that's effectively it. I mean, and that's why you won't see this arrangement being opened up to people, say, from China anytime soon, or any other sort of powers that we may have.
No Sudanese gangs being approached for by Peter Dutton for the for entry into this program.
No. It's the countries that are slated to come online, shall we say, after New Zealand, America, or the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada, which are all members of the Five Eyes intelligence service as well. So,
and overwhelmingly, extremely white.
Yes.
Coincidence?
Well, it's about strategic alignment. So this is where all our, I guess all our defense interests lie, and they want to sort of line that up so to make sure there's no spies, basically, I guess is the main point.
Yeah, I mean, what were they expecting?
My question...
Someone to come in and start asking about launch codes? Like, what was the... Hey, anyone seen any launch codes lying around?
And the US never had any spies.
Not a one.
No such thing as a US spy. Pine Gap?
Huh? Pine who?
What's that?
Pine what?
The US famously doesn't spy on any of its allies ever.
None.
So basically, I mean, this has been announced. There was some, the assistant minister was like, it'll be opened up to a bunch of other countries, and then Richard Marles was like,
shut the fuck up.
No, shut the fuck up, buddy.
Have you tried shutting the fuck up?
Yeah, otherwise the actual announcement itself was a complete clusterfuck. Everyone's saying different things. The ADF are like, foreign citizens, and everyone's like, huh? And the government's like, from a bunch of places, huh?
Matt Keogh, who is I think he's the minister for like military people or personnel or something like that. It's got a weird sort of title, but obviously one of the guys that's responsible for getting people into the defense force, kind of fucked it. Richard Marles had to stand up in Parliament and be like, just to clarify. And then meanwhile, Peter Dutton's just like, it's oh my god, the government is lost
chaos, catastrophe.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I got to head off. I got a private jet waiting for me, just idling on the tarmac. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, the way that this article from the ABC frames it, it does really sound like a colossal cock-up, because they put it as that Matt Keogh laid out the plan saying recruitment would be open to all countries from January is how the ABC's phrased it, when Richard Marles been like, whoa.
I think Matt Keogh might have seen some... classified documentation and then talked about it in public without realizing. That's the Australian government has got a very tight lid on it at this stage with reference to the Five Eyes allies. And I think Matt Keogh might get a subtle, a little taken out the back and old yelled, a little quiet talking to from a great height, perhaps.
Can you imagine that though?
I do wonder though whether the initial policy was like
just all countries,
everyone. And then Richard Marles has had a very angsty phone call from
a stern word. Read him the Riot Act.
The United States, the defense minister or defense secretary or something for the United States. And then they've gone, actually.
To me, it seems like the sort of thing where we'll pilot it with our close allies, the Five Eyes, and down the track, we'll eventually want to open this up to other friendly countries for them to join our armed forces, because the Australian Defence Force is having a real time attracting, as we said earlier, they're having a really hard time attracting people to positions in the Defence Force, which we need if we're going to achieve the targets that we have set. Now, whether those targets are realistic or important or necessary in any way is another question entirely. I would argue that they're not. But if we're going to hit those fake targets that we've created for ourselves, we need more people. We need more bodies. More grist for the mill, as it were. So,
I don't know if this will even work, to be honest.
It won't. It will not.
I don't. But, I mean, it might. It'll up it a little bit.
Don't worry, it'll be expensive. So don't worry about it.
That's the important part. Make sure it's expensive.
It's going to cost lots of money, regardless. So that's good.
It's also opened up a bunch of sort of talk around why people don't want to join the military. And I mean, I guess the key thing there is, the Zoomers, the ones that are currently sort of around 20 years old, which is generally your core. If you're targeting people to join the military, you need to sort of grab them generally straight out of high school.
The Zoomers are not ready to shove a bayonet between the ribs of a communist Vietnamese person in the jungle somewhere. They are too busy on TikTok. They are definitely not open to that.
And also very famously anti-war.
Yeah, famously.
Just from a lot of.
They grew up with just desert forever wars happening around them.
I don't know why they're not into it. It's so weird.
Yeah,
without any sort of contact. I mean, at least I can remember 9/11. I can remember sort of the general vibe.
What a day!
But after that, but for them, it's like, I was born and we were just in Iraq.
I really do think that
fucking shit up.
The American invasion of Iraq, whilst we knew it was bad at the time, and we were against it. And it was obviously a bad foreign policy decision. It's had disastrous consequences. I don't think we've really understood the historical ramifications of what that moment has meant to America's standing at the world. I think when we look at it from a historical perspective, 20, 30, 40 years from now, it's going to be the kind of inflection point that people will turn out and go, that's when the American empire started to decline, is they lost the moral high ground with the invasion of Iraq. And you can see the flow-on effects to, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in, the war in Ukraine. The United States and the West has kind of lost that sheen of legitimacy in being the world police. The whole thing about Team America World Police, the joke is that America was the big hegemon being the world police looking after everything. And the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan kind of made that absurd and satirical. Because now they couldn't be taken seriously as the world police anymore because they were such obvious hypocrites. And I know that America's been running secret wars in South America and when the Iran-Contra scandal and running guns and drugs in the 80s under the Reagan administration, and the CIA was doing a bunch of dodgy shit in Vietnam and all that sort of stuff beforehand. But it was the first time that it was done so out in the open like that, where it was just obvious that Iraq had nothing to do with what was going on in 9/11, and they just wanted to settle old scores, and the whole world knew it as it was happening. Even though there were people going to bat for it, and the whole defense industry establishment and the New York Times and everyone was beating the drumbeat for war, everyone kind of knew it was bullshit. And I think that started the long path to where we are now, and where the American empire is going to find itself over the next 10 to 20 years. It's just a place of it's not this Pax Americana, the American peace and stability that's been since the Second World War, but it's going to become a degenerating kind of multipolar regional spheres of influence where you've got the Americans, you've got the Western sphere, you've got the UK and the Americans and Australia and Canada. Then you've got the Chinese, you've got people in the middle, the countries like India and stuff that are kind of trying to find exactly where they're it's very much a multipolar world now rather than American being at the head of it. And I think all of this, but coming back to the story, flows through to people's perceptions of the military and military action
in Australia
as well, because we were part of it. We joined the Americans. We went and fought in unjust wars. And Gen Z is kind of grew up looking at that, as you say, Adam, being involved in 2 pointless desert forever wars, and thought, that's not what I want to do with my life. And fair enough. It's not like that fighting the Nazis where you go, okay, this is a completely justifiable righteous conflict that I'm going to join and be a part of and help beat back fascism. We don't have that in our generation. No one looks at the army that way. It's considered completely differently. And I think it's because of Iraq and to some extent Afghanistan as well. Sorry, just a bit of history there. Just sprinkle it in. Just a real, what did you say? A little zeitgeist right into the face, as you said, Adam.
A zeitgeist a zeitgeist banger right on the face. Something like
right in the face.
Which I think makes more sense in the context that I used it than it ever did in the context that you used it.
You said it an hour ago.
Whatever.
That was a zeitgeist banger right into the face.
It will persist now in your memory holes, that phrase, and you can use it in whatever context you want forever.
Memory holes. Is that like memory?
My memory hole?
Is that your memory hole?
Is that like memory foam?
Your memory is a hole.
No.
It's a hole where all your memories go.
Uh-huh.
It's going to persist in there. Some of them seep through if you've got dementia.
Seep through to what?
The hole?
Through
the
the
membrane
hole?
of the... I don't know. No, the hole's at the top. Although the sides of the...
Your brain will never cease to amuse me.
Adam, the hole is at the top? Holes famously have depth.
Yeah, so... No, but
like the hole.
Like there's a hole, and then the memories will go in.
No. An entrance to a hole can be at the top of something, but really the hole is the absence of stuff.
Well, sure, there's a hole. Yes, correct. But let's call it the opening of the hole then. Fine, whatever. Semantics.
Well, am I high? I feel like this conversation has made me high. What is happening?
Yeah.
A few whiskeys, but anyway.
What? The hole is at the top of what? I know you want to move on to the next story, but I'm not going to let you. What the hell did you mean?
I was like, just think of like a sock, right? There's a hole at the top of the sock where you put your foot in, and there's a space in which you can put your foot. So your memories in this instance would go into the hole.
They're in the neck of the sock.
Yes.
In the foot of the sock, as it were.
A sack of memories.
Inside the sock.
Yeah.
What?
What? I thought I explained that very clearly. I don't understand.
Speaking of socks, Kylea Tink's seat of North Sydney is set to be scrapped in a proposed electorate boundaries shake-up. So you might know it's got nothing to do with socks. I was just begging to move on. So the seat of North Sydney, the AEC, the Australian Electoral Commission, has come out and said, we know you just filled that seat with a teal independent. Sorry, that seat doesn't exist anymore. Sucked in. So we talked about a seat last week, being the new seat that they announced in WA, being Bullwinkle, and the removal of the seat of Higgins here in Victoria. And obviously this is part of that same process, is sort of redistributing the seats based on population growth. So particularly around Northern Sydney, there hasn't been that kind of population growth where there has been in Western Australia. And so in order to ensure a non-partisan democratic process, the AEC goes through all these different seats and tries to, in a non-partisan way, redistrict and rearrange these seats. And sometimes that involves the dissolution of seats altogether. Now, that's what's being proposed in this case. Now, it's not locked in, but it is pretty much locked in. So they're like, oh, you can have, there's a comment period. It's like, yeah, I'm sure the AEC is interested in my comments.
The government loves a comment period, don't they?
Well, they have to like look like they give at least a semblance of a shit.
Yeah. And they go, thanks very much for your input. We're going to do whatever it is we were going to do anyway. And that counts as community consultation.
Yeah. Whether or not you're a member of the community or a fucking royal commission. They'll be like, thank you for your feedback.
Thanks for your feedback.
No, thank you.
No, thanks.
We're going to do what we're going to do anyway.
So I think the nerds are going to be out there with their calculators kind of working out exactly what this is going to mean for the various surrounding seats and the flow-on effects for the voters that were kind of like nominally progressive in so far as they voted for a teal candidate. I think it's unfortunate because like I do like most of the teals. I feel as though they've done a good job, like despite the absence of an actual political party and like cohesive political messaging philosophy, like most of them have done pretty good. They've done well for their communities. Like from my understanding, Kylea Tink has been really good about communicating back to her constituents on like a weekly basis about her movements in Parliament. She's done a really good job. She's still really well admired. So it kind of sucks that she gets
weird that
kicked out.
She's
but
a first timer as well.
She is, yeah.
It's weird that they've picked up like two first timers are having their seats dissolved under this redistribution, which is
I am curious about that. It's like this has been a seat that's existed since Federation. And like now that an independent's got in there, they're like, say goodbye to North Sydney. Yeah. Now, she hasn't said whether she's going to potentially contest in Bradfield, which is a neighbouring electorate, which is held by the Liberal Party. Some say that, you know, the redistribution of some of her previous voters into that electorate might make it a more winnable seat than it otherwise would have been. And there's also Warringah, which is nearby, which is held by independent Zali Steagall, who we're familiar with. So, yeah, there's a lot of changes happening there as to who benefits. Like, it seems like it's mostly kind of pretty even-handed. There was a statement from someone who was talking about how how it sort of shook out for each major party. So I forget the quote. It doesn't matter. But basically it was like it's sort of, Labor, sort of loses one, but they might be in contention for another seat elsewhere as a result. And same for the Liberals, same for the Teals. Like it does.
They've sort of done it, in a way that would balance out in terms of the balance of power across the country. Like for instance, the seat of Bennelong has notionally changed from Labor to a Liberal seat. That's gone from so Jerome Laxall of Labor won that in 2022, which is with a 1% margin, and that would now go back to a Liberal margin of 0.1%. But Labor may grow. The other thing to think about is the other thing that the AEC is doing is they're also trying to forecast, shall we say, demographic changes that aren't necessarily that are going to happen or are currently in play. So what they're saying is, it's actually a university seat. So you'll find that as more constituents, arrive at the university, if the university is growing, for instance, then you're going to have more university students
and
who
they're
are more
likely to be
vote
more
Labor.
Politically progressive. Sure.
Yeah. So that might swing it back again. So it's a sort of a relative.
It's hard.
It's
hard to do this in a non-partisan way because no matter what you do, someone's going to be pissed off at you, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. So so here's the quote. Samaras, who's the director at polling group Redbridge, was talking to the ABC about it, and he said that the AEC had been, quote, quite balanced in political party terms, consistent with its usual approach. Quote, a Teal seat gets abolished, but then Bradfield becomes a much easier seat for the Teals to win. Again, so kind of like treating Teals as though they're a party, which they're not, but that aside. Labor's seat of Bennelong becomes more marginal, but the Liberals' seat of Bradfield hits the deck. So basically what he's saying there is it's kind of evenly, the pain is sort of evenly spread amongst the main sort of political players. Again, I object to the characterization of Teals as a party because they're not a party.
They're kind of just it's like a shared branding thing, isn't it?
So if you listen to the people who I do listen to this podcast by a lady whose name that I will tell you, the Spin Proof podcast with Denise Ravel, who was like a campaign manager for one of the Teal independents last time around, has been thoroughly involved with the community independence movement. The way she describes it is she really pushes back on that assertion that it is a party. There was a very tense exchange on her podcast this week where someone levied that exact accusation at her, and she's like, that's absolutely not the case. But the way she describes it is a network of community support where basically, people will talk about how many t-shirts did you get made up and how did you know how many to buy of each size? It's kind of like community support for on the ground activism more than it is like Climate 200 has their own party, which is not really the case, even though that is sometimes how it's characterized in the media. It's more about how do you run campaigns? How do you best represent your community's interests? And it's like a common network of people who kind of share those same ideals.
It's a Facebook group. That's what it is.
It's kind of, it's like a Facebook group for how to run local campaigns, more or less. And
is that not a political party to some extent?
But it depends on, it is about the community independence movement insofar as it is like a shared movement, is about expressing the values of the constituents in that seat and getting them to propose a candidate that is the best representative of the median kind of point of all of those values. Whereas a political party is like, these are our stated values. If you have those values, you can join us. Whereas the Teals are like, we are trying
Spartacus.
to... No, I am Spartacus. Yeah, exactly right. Where they're trying to help each community come up with their own leader and leadership style, which may not necessarily reflect a cohesive overall party narrative. They might have differing points of view. However, they do all tend to be focused on issues of gender equality, climate action, political accountability in the form of anti-corruption and things like that. So there are some common themes, but I would argue that that's probably because Australian voters have those common themes. They want accountability. They want action on climate change. They want, if you go and poll a bunch of regular Australians in about any seat in Australia, they'll probably tell you similar things. We want cost of living relief. We want something done about climate change. We don't want political corruption. These are pretty populist positions. And so it's not too much of a surprise that a lot of the Teal candidates come forward with those views, because that is what it's an emergent property of the populace of Australia having largely similar views, which the major parties aren't inclined to really listen to because of how they're structured, because they're busy hanging out with Gina Reinhardt at expensive parties that they cost them $23,000 worth of taxpayer money to get to.
It was a summit.
It was a summit.
Yep.
Where we're going to whinge about
the
cost of living.
Daily Telegraph Bush Summit.
I just can't imagine anything more nightmare fuel than a Buschdorf with Gina Reinhardt and Peter Dutton out. Could you imagine?
Bad.
It sounds really bad.
No, George. If it was a Buschdorf, I'd probably want to go.
I would go. Don't get me wrong.
Summit? Hell no. Buschdorf. Let's do it.
Let's go.
I think another part of this that I think is just really fucking just a little tidbit. That they just a little throwaway line they mentioned here in the rearranging of some of the seats. They've also decided that the seat of Cook is not changing its name, but it's now going to be named after two people. And you're like, they're changing the name of the seat of Cook, are they? It's like, no, it's still called Cook. It's just now named after Captain Cook. Captain James Cook.
Which presumably it was before.
Which it was before.
Okay.
But now it's also named after Joseph Cook, our 6th Prime Minister.
So is that just them saying it's not a racist name because it's not just named after Captain Cook, it's also after another Cook who was also Prime Minister? Like, that seems like a weird thing.
It changes literally nothing.
Yeah.
Like, the name doesn't change.
But Tom, the Wikipedia changes. So when someone says it's named after James Cook, that's racist. They go, no. It's also named after cooking.
Yeah, it's so like, oh god.
It'd be pretty funny if Joseph Cook was also a racist or something. That was like,
I mean,
say that Captain Cook was a racist, although
are we not to saying that?
I'm not. I don't want to. Let's not.
Yeah,
I don't want to
throw accusations out there.
I don't want to not say that Captain Cook was a racist.
Remember when an indigenous population ate him? That was great.
Is that how his story ended?
Yep.
Was that in it was like
they killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they ate him. And it was on Valentine's Day.
It was in
every February 14th. People are like, happy Captain Cook got eaten day.
It was in Hawaii. They didn't eat him. They killed him.
I can swear they ate him.
They
should have.
He got killed in Hawaii.
That's right. Yeah, I think they talked about this on the Dollop.
Yeah, so my wife just walked in and said, just like popped her head in to be like, are you talking about Valentine's Day and Captain Cook? I was like, yes, we are. About him getting eaten. She's like, right on.
He didn't get it. He did not get eaten.
So
they got his body. He's buried in England somewhere.
Or is he, Adam?
I don't know if he was eaten, but he was. Yeah, he was confronted on the beach by an elderly kahuna, which is like a Hawaiian like leader. Who approached him holding a coconut and chanting. They yelled at the priest to go away, but he kept approaching them while singing the melee. When Cook and his men looked away from the old kahuna, they saw that the beach was now filled with thousands of native Hawaiians. Cook told the kahuna to get up, but the ruler refused. As the townspeople began to gather around them, Cook and his men began to back away from the hostile crowd and raise their guns. The two chief and just shield them. So it sounds like...
Apologies. No, I see how I misremembered this. I've seen a few random little sources here. Wasn't that he was eaten? Sorry, he was dismembered. I think was
okay. Well, that's
I mixed those two things up. That is my bad. But anyway,
he got stabbed in the chest with a metal dagger.
Yeah,
that's pretty metal.
Yeah, I've seen killed and dismembered in 1779.
That's pretty sick.
They picked him back up, what was left of him, and shipped him back to England. Though I'm pretty sure
separate parts
where they ate him there.
Would you like this delivered in as few packages as possible, or would you like it delivered next day?
Yeah.
Joseph Cook was our Prime Minister during
number 6
World War One. Actually, at the start of World War One. Billy Hughes, I think, was the next Prime Minister.
Why does Billy Hughes sound not like a Prime Minister and more like a pickpocket from a Dickensian novel? It's old Billy Hughes, the Artful Dodger.
Like a 70s rock and roll.
Yeah, mate. It's like Billy Hughes, who turns out to be like sexually problematic when a documentary comes out, many years down the track.
Yeah.
Old Billy Hughes, they really trusted him. Speaking of people who trusted people, Donald Trump. So this is great. This transition is great. I can use it on anything.
He idioted harder than he's idioting about as much as he idiots normally.
Speaking about sexually problematic people, Donald Trump. Recently, behind closed doors. Now, the thing that was the real surprise to me about this article was that Donald Trump is capable of describing something behind closed doors that he does not then proceed to discuss behind open doors to large crowds of people. So the fact that he has some capacity for describing things in private and keeping them from the public was frankly, that was like a renaissance.
For now.
It's amazing that he has that skill. It would have come in handy for him many times, I think. But
yeah, well, some people have argued that because he's kind of facing down the barrel of this election with, 3 more criminal trials, and he's more or less running to keep himself out of prison, that his message discipline has been much better this time around than it has been in years past, which is both good and bad. Good in that, actually, it's not good. It's very bad because it means he might win. There's no good thing about that. But so the story that we're talking about today is Trump floated eliminating U.S. income tax in a closed door meeting with Republican senators and congresspeople and donors. And he talked about replacing the money that would be lost from getting rid of federal income tax with tariffs on imports. Now, believe it or not,
sounds like a great idea, George. Getting rid of income tax. What a great idea. Let's vote for him.
It is not a good idea. It is. You don't need to be a listener of the Unnatural Selection Podcast or have an MBA or an economics degree to know at this stage, if you've been listening to, that's a bad idea. Like what's that line in Star Wars where he goes, what does he say? It's like search within yourself.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true. That is exactly like you knowing nothing about this. If you search your feelings, you know it to be true that this is a bad idea because there is nothing. The amount of tariffs that would need to be created to replace federal income tax, which I would argue is most of the tax, would be substantial. It would require, someone did an analysis on this, 85% import tax in order to make up the amount that would be lost from federal income tax.
Yeah.
That would now...
Wouldn't that mean, from me being an idiot who doesn't understand economics, wouldn't that then mean that
do you notice you say that? Do you notice you say that right before you say something that's profoundly true?
Yeah, because if even I get it, and I'm a dumb,
Tom's like, I might be a dumb, but doesn't that mean? And then proceeds to say the exact true thing.
Exact true thing, yeah. Because wouldn't that then mean that fewer people will ship goods to America?
That is exactly the point. Yes.
Good luck running your country. You don't make everything you use in America, you idiots.
And what that essentially equates to is inflation of 85% on goods and services that Americans take from other countries. Right. So
your PlayStation is now 85% more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Your PlayStation is now $1,000 as a result because it comes from elsewhere. And the thing that really bothers me about Trump and talk about tariffs and all this sort of stuff, this bullshitting that he does over the years, talking about tariffs and having a trade war with China and all this sort of stuff that he started while he was in office, it's like the people who pay tariffs, if you start a trade war with China and you apply tariffs on Chinese goods, the people who pay those tariffs are Americans. That's what a tariff is you're making something more expensive for Americans so American consumers will buy less of that thing. So for the guy,
use tariffs to sanction, kind of, right?
Well, yeah, to sanction, but the person who, yes, the country that is the target of those tariffs has a negative effect in that they're not exporting as much stuff, which is obviously detrimental to an economy such as China, where their primary way of getting money is through exports. But it's also detrimental to American consumers. Like the ones that suffer the most are your constituents, because now, there was a big thing about American farmers that was suffering under Trump because he had this trade war with China. And so we're not going to buy, XYZ products from you, and China turned around and said, well, great, well, we're going to sanction your soy farmers, your soybeans, your hay, your corn, your all this sort of stuff. We're not going to buy from you either. And so the people that were really hurt by this were A, American consumers who are buying Chinese goods, and B, American farmers who make up, like a significant...
trying to sell to China.
They're trying to sell, like it is a trade war, and tariffs are like a dual-edged weapon. Like, yes, you might hurt someone else, but you always also hurt yourself at the same time. And once trade wars escalate, they tend to get worse because there's always this tit for tat kind of thing where you institute a tariff and they institute a tariff back to you, and then you institute another one, and all of a sudden, like, multiple large multinational economies grind to a halt because they're not selling with their largest trading partner because they want to swing their dicks at each other. Like, it's bad for everyone. Not to mention the fact that it's like inherently regressive as a tax. There are a bunch of people that don't pay federal income tax because they earn below the threshold that would now be paying twice as much for several forms of goods that they have to purchase. And so it's essentially shifting a tax burden. The people who have income tax are by definition people who earn a bunch of income. And so by shifting the tax burden from high income earners directly into the low and middle class, it would also have disastrous effects for American demand and the economy. And it's just bad. It's just a bad idea, and it's a bad idea, and it's dumb, and it's bad, and I don't know who to talk about it. You guys are the only people I can talk about it. It's really upsetting.
But George, it'll probably work.
No.
No.
Cannot.
Listen, not as a policy, but as a electoral. I can't do it. As an election promise, it'll probably work.
Yeah, as an election promise, all this crazy bullshit that you've talked about. Like, sure, people might acknowledge it, but it's bundled with the thought, I don't have to pay income tax.
Yeah.
And then your brain just shuts down. It's just all...
I've listened
where you're thinking about all the things that you'll do with the money you're allegedly saving from income tax, like buying your solid gold house or just fucking on piles of money and getting paper cuts in all your giblets. Like,
yeah, you're right. The constituency is rich American Republican mega donors that don't have to pay income tax anymore. I get it.
Not even that. The middle, like what do they call it? The Rust Belt or whatever it's called. The Middle America. Like they're gonna. You mean I don't have to pay any more
income tax? Just tyranny.
They're going to be frothing at this kind of thing.
It's just like every American economics podcast that I listen to, and yes, there's more than one. How dare you?
Of course, there's more than one.
Every single one of them have just been like it's the audio equivalent of facepalm. They're just like, why would you do this? This makes no sense. Like every single expert that I've heard talk about this has just been like, this is a bad idea. This makes no sense. It's regressive. It's terrible. It's going to cause a trade war. This is terrible. Why? Why is this happening? Why am I having to talk about it? Why? Why is this? Why did I choose this career? I should have gone and done law like my mum said. Why have I done this to myself?
To be fair as well, this is not necessarily an actual policy yet. It is an idea that's been brought up.
Yeah.
But that's all you need.
Well, nuking hurricanes was also just an idea, but he said it. It's something he wanted to do.
This is all that Trump needs, though, is an idea. Like, they don't have to even... He doesn't have to mention this again. But as long as it plays for a week or two on the news cycle...
That's a good point. Yeah, because it's giving red meat to his, to his base, right? It's even if he doesn't end up doing anything, he's still flagging to the... alt-right shitbags that, I'll cut your taxes, right? That was their Faustian pact. That was the devil's bargain that they always made with Trump. We want our Supreme Court justices and we want our tax cuts. And of the major pieces of legislation that he delivered during his tenure as president, that was the big thing, the big corporate tax cuts. That was the major thing that he delivered. So you're right. It's a signal to everyone being like, we'll give you some more tax cuts. We'll get rid of income tax. Like, I know that's all you guys give a fuck about. There was the prostitute thing.
I'll do you one better. Taxes aren't a thing anymore.
No more taxes. How about we abolish taxes? Yeah, it's just a big middle finger to the establishment, basically.
Yeah.
It's bad.
It's taxes do important things.
Yeah.
He should know that. Of course,
it's infringement on my rights, Tom.
Taxation is inherently theft. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Visit us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at our handle at Unnatural Show. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and motherflippin' TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me to South Australia, where I will live in the land of equality and no donations to political parties.
And good wine.
A good wine.
Honestly, should we move to South Australia?
Maybe.
It's not sounding bad when you characterize it like that. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll love you faces. We'll see you next week. A little Clear Valley Riesling, some income taxes.
Some desert. Just a lot of desert.
Okay.
Just mostly desert.
All right.
Wolf Creek. We could go check out Wolf Creek.
All right. Now I'm coming around on it maybe not being such a good idea, but yeah.